The unthinkable has just materialized before our very eyes. For the first time since its inception in the ashes of the Second World War, the ultimate global security pact has been weaponized against its primary architect. Mark Carney has just activated NATO Article 5, and the intended target is not the Russian Federation, nor is it the People's Republic of China. The target is the United States of America. Just minutes ago, Donald Trump issued a direct, internationally televised threat of kinetic military action against allied European and Commonwealth naval forces. This is not a diplomatic drill, and it is certainly not a political negotiation tactic. The Western alliance, the absolute bedrock of global market stability and geopolitical order since 1945, has catastrophically and perhaps permanently fractured. Mainstream news networks are frantically scrambling, feeding you a highly sanitized, redacted version of what they call a minor maritime dispute. But the truth they are hiding is far darker, immensely more complex, and terrifyingly irreversible. We are currently observing the largest and most lethal military mobilization in the North Atlantic theater since the height of the Cold War. This singular event changes everything you thought you knew about global security, trade, and the safety of your own capital. You need to understand exactly what underlying forces just triggered this unprecedented standoff. The consequences of this fracture are already rippling through the algorithmic trading desks and into your personal bank account. Stay with me because the next few minutes will decode the most dangerous geopolitical crisis of the modern era. To comprehend why a NATO ally would dare invoke Article 5 against the United States, we must look away from the press briefings and examine the deep architecture of global supply chains. The mainstream media is deliberately framing Trump's military threat as an isolated incident of aggressive America first rhetoric. But seasoned geopolitical veterans understand that wars are never truly fought over diplomatic slights. They are fought over raw resources, navigable pathways, and the foundational architecture of fiat money. The empirical data is crystal clear, and it points directly to the rapidly thawing waters of the Arctic Circle. Over the last 24 months, shifting climatic patterns have opened the once impassable Northwest Passage to year-round commercial mega-freighters. Washington has quietly yet ruthlessly moved to assert absolute sovereign control over these newly navigable waters. The Pentagon is currently treating this vital global artery as strictly internal American and bilateral territory, effectively locking out foreign transit. This aggressive maneuver directly bypasses established international maritime law and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. By enforcing this maritime blockade, the United States is intentionally cutting Europe out of the most lucrative, time-saving new trade route of the entire 21st century. Simultaneously, we have witnessed the systematic engineered dismantling of the transatlantic euro-dollar swap lines. The United States Federal Reserve, operating under immense political pressure from the new nationalist mandate in Washington, has heavily restricted dollar liquidity to the European Central Bank. This was not a bureaucratic oversight, it was a highly calculated, devastating financial blockade designed to bring European markets to their knees. When you fuse a physical military chokehold on Arctic shipping with a digital financial stranglehold on global dollar access, you create a geopolitical powder keg. Mark Carney's unprecedented maneuver today was not a sudden emotional burst of European outrage. It was the precise culmination of a highly classified strategic wargaming session that took place exactly 3 weeks ago in a subterranean bunker beneath Brussels. During that emergency summit, allied European intelligence agencies independently confirmed that the U.S. Navy was preparing to board, seize, and potentially scuttle European commercial vessels. The crime of these vessels, attempting to transit the disputed Arctic routes without paying exorbitant American transit tariffs or submitting to U.S. military inspections. Trump's explicit threat of military action earlier today was merely the public undeniable confirmation of this classified naval operation. But there is a third, entirely suppressed variable driving this existential crisis. Look closely at the massive, newly confirmed rare earth mineral deposits buried deep beneath the Greenland ice sheet. Exactly 2 months ago, a massive consortium of European defense contractors and sovereign wealth funds signed an exclusive extraction treaty with Greenland's local authorities. The United States' immediate response was to declare that treaty utterly null and void, citing a drastically expanded, militarized interpretation of the Monroe Doctrine. Washington proactively stationed a heavily armed carrier strike group in the North Atlantic, implicitly daring European capitals to send their extraction equipment into the exclusion zone. The hidden truth, the reality that defense contractors are desperate to conceal, is that whoever controls the Greenland deposits dictates the next 50 years of advanced microchip and hypersonic missile technology. By pulling the trigger on Article 5, Carney is forcing the hand of every single NATO member state. They must now choose between the total economic survival of the European continent and absolute subjugation to American hemispheric hegemony. The foundational text of the NATO treaty explicitly dictates that an armed attack against one member is an undeniable attack against all members. By legally categorizing the U.S. naval blockade and Trump's threat of kinetic force as an unprovoked act of aggression, Europe has effectively declared a defensive stance against the very superpower that funds its defense umbrella. This is a geopolitical paradox of catastrophic proportions that threatens to collapse the entire post-war global order by midnight. At the very center of this swirling maelstrom are three distinct, uncompromising power centers, each operating with a ruthless zero-sum logic. First, we must analyze Donald Trump and his completely restructured, highly loyalist Pentagon apparatus. The old guard of internationalist coalition-building generals has been systematically purged and replaced by strategic nationalists. These new commanders view international alliances not as assets, but as parasitic, outdated drains on American wealth and military readiness. For the current administration, the strategic calculation is coldly pragmatic and heavily reliant on game theory. They firmly believe that Europe is fundamentally weak, economically stagnant, culturally fractured, and entirely dependent on American military hardware for basic survival. The explicit threat to use overwhelming military force against Allied ships is specifically designed to call Europe's ultimate bluff. The Pentagon is betting the house that Paris, London, and Berlin will never actually authorize their frigates to engage American Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in a shooting war. The administration's ultimate endgame is total unquestioned energy and resource independence secured by unassailable global naval supremacy. Then we have Mark Carney acting as the designated spearhead for the unified desperation of the Euro-Atlantic financial and political elite. Carney's unprecedented transition from central banking technocrat to supreme political crisis manager was born out of sheer terrifying economic necessity. He understands better than any living economist that without guaranteed access to the new Arctic trade routes, the European industrial base is doomed. Without the Greenland rare earth minerals, European tech and defense manufacturing will completely collapse within a single decade. Invoking Article 5 against the United States is the ultimate legal and political nuclear option. It is meticulously designed to shock the American public, terrify global equity markets, and force the U.S. Congress to desperately rein in the executive branch before live munitions are fired. Carney is not foolish enough to try and conventionally defeat the U.S. military on the open ocean. He is executing a psychological operation to engineer a massive, paralyzing domestic political crisis within the borders of the United States. The third and perhaps most unpredictable and dangerous player is the shadow intelligence apparatus operating deep within NATO itself. The massive entrenched bureaucracy in Brussels is literally fighting for its own institutional survival. If the United States can unilaterally blockade NATO members and threaten their sovereign shipping without severe consequence, the alliance is effectively and permanently dead. We are currently tracking verified reports of rogue elements within European intelligence agencies actively leaking classified American naval positions to the global press. They are intentionally escalating the crisis in the public sphere to make any quiet backdoor de-escalation completely impossible. This is a multi-domain strategic battle where the weapons of choice are not just anti-ship missiles, but sovereign debt yields, currency valuation attacks, and critical cyber infrastructure sabotage. The Pentagon is already actively wargaming a nightmare scenario where desperate European allies seize physical American military assets currently stationed on their sovereign soil. Imagine billions of dollars of advanced U.S. aircraft, nuclear munitions, and logistical hubs currently locked down in Germany and Italy suddenly becoming hostile confiscated territory. The internal agonizing schism within the U.S. military command structure is also a vital underreported factor here. We have confirmed highly classified intercepts indicating that several high-ranking American naval commanders have formally requested immediate clarification on the rules of engagement. They are demanding to know if they are legally, morally, and constitutionally obligated to fire upon British or French vessels flying the flags of long-time historic allies. This precise hesitation in the operational chain of command is exactly the friction that Carney is banking on to delay a kinetic strike. This is a planetary high-stakes game of chicken, and both sides have intentionally ripped the brakes out of their vehicles. If you sit at home and think this is just a theoretical problem for diplomats in tailored suits and admirals in uniform, you are gravely, dangerously mistaken. The economic fallout of this fracture is already breaching your front door, aggressively draining your wallet, and threatening your family's future security. The very second the invocation of NATO Article 5 hit the Bloomberg terminals, global equities experienced a terrifying, localized flash crash. We are not merely talking about a standard cyclical dip in the S&P 500 or the Nasdaq. We are actively witnessing the sudden, violent, and structural decoupling of the transatlantic economy in real time. When the threat of state-on-state military conflict threatens the vital Atlantic supply lines, maritime insurance premiums for oceanic freight skyrocket overnight. Those astronomical unbudgeted costs are immediately and mercilessly passed down to you, the end consumer. Everything from the advanced microchips in your vehicle to the life-saving pharmaceuticals in your cabinet relies entirely on a delicate, unimpeded flow of global oceanic trade. Within the next 72 hours, you will see a massive, unprecedented spike in baseline energy and fuel prices. To understand the brutal mathematical reality of this impending supply shock, we can look at the basic formulation of exponential commodity inflation pricing during conflict scenarios. Text price text, future text price text current times 8. As the geopolitical risk coefficient dollars skyrockets exponentially, the rapid decay of your fiat purchasing power becomes a mathematical certainty. With vital U.S. naval assets rapidly pivoting to face hostile European allies in the Atlantic, the American security umbrella over the volatile Middle East and the contested Pacific is temporarily lifted. OPEC nations are already aggressively signaling massive production cuts, knowing full well that the West is too internally fractured and distracted to retaliate. You will feel this massive geopolitical shift directly at the gas pump tomorrow morning, and you will feel it brutally in your winter heating bills. But the immediate painful physical costs pale in comparison to the silent financial warfare currently underway in the digital realm. In direct retaliation for the Article 5 activation, the U.S. Treasury is drafting emergency orders to freeze European sovereign assets held in American legal jurisdictions. This is the absolute nuclear option of global interconnected finance. If major European banks cannot access their vital dollar reserves to clear trades, international letters of credit will bounce globally. Massive cargo ships will sit anchored at port indefinitely because absolutely nobody can guarantee payment for the millions of dollars of goods inside. When those algorithmic thresholds are breached, the contagion spreads faster than any central bank can print liquidity to stop it. This is the exact recipe for a localized, devastating supply chain collapse that easily rivals the darkest, most restrictive days of the recent global lockdowns. Your 401k, your pension, and your retirement portfolio are intimately and inextricably tied to the continued stability of transatlantic multinational corporations. When those massive corporations can no longer legally or physically operate in both the US and Europe without violating severe sanctions or military embargoes, their market valuations will plummet to zero. We are looking down the barrel of a scenario where strict draconian capital controls are instituted in major Western democracies. You may wake up next week to find strict legal limits on how much money you can wire overseas. You may even discover hard limits on how much physical cash you can withdraw from your own local ATM as terrified banks attempt to prevent a systemic nationwide run on liquidity. The profound truth they are hiding from the public is that the entire global financial system requires absolute, unquestioned trust between Washington and European capitals. That fundamental trust has just been shattered into a million pieces by the explicit threat of American naval artillery. The post-Cold War era of cheap, reliable overseas goods and globally stable fiat currencies is officially and permanently over. You must take immediate action to prepare your household for a prolonged, agonizing period of hypervolatility, inflation, and engineered resource scarcity. The historical data and current intelligence intercepts are terrifyingly clear on what happens next. The timeline of this crisis is moving significantly faster than any academic analyst or government official anticipated. Within the next 7 to 10 days, we will witness the aggressive implementation of severe state-sponsored cyber blockades. Long before any kinetic missiles or torpedoes are fired, both the U.S. Cyber Command and unified European cyber units will begin aggressively probing and blinding their counterparts. They will actively test the resilience of the electrical grids, water treatment facilities, and critical communication networks of former allies. You must expect severe, entirely unexplained internet outages, banking application failures, and critical disruptions to major cloud services that run the modern economy. By day 14 of this escalating crisis, the tense naval standoff in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic will reach an absolute, undeniable critical threshold. Desperate European commercial vessels heavily escorted by heavily armed French and British naval frigates will attempt to test the American blockade lines in the Arctic. The U.S. Navy will aggressively shadow them, broadcasting final legal warnings on open military channels. This precise moment is where the risk of a catastrophic civilization-altering miscalculation peaks. A single warning shot that strays too close or a radar glitch interpreted as a hostile missile lock could trigger automated, decentralized defensive weapon systems. By day 21, the crushing economic strain will force major globally recognized corporations into emergency Chapter 11 restructuring. We will see millions of mass furloughs globally in the logistics, oceanic shipping, and international finance sectors. Panicked governments will highly likely announce emergency national bank holidays to forcefully prevent capital flight, locking you out of your own investments in cash temporarily. By day 30, the world as you know it will have completely splintered into two distinct, highly hostile economic realities. The United States will violently double down on an absolute isolationist sovereignty model. Washington will begin hoarding domestic resources, nationalizing critical industries, and heavily militarizing its own commercial shipping lanes. Europe, completely cut off from the American security apparatus and dollar liquidity, will be forced to desperately pivot. They will have no choice but to reach out to Eastern powers, fundamentally aligning with former adversaries to backfill the massive economic and security void left by the United States. The NATO alliance as a functioning integrated military entity will be effectively suspended indefinitely, entirely dissolving the post-World War II security architecture. You have precisely 30 days to secure your personal supply lines, aggressively hedge your investments into hard assets, and brace your family for a completely new, incredibly hostile global paradigm. The true devastating cost of Donald Trump's military threat and Mark Carney's retaliatory Article 5 activation cannot be measured strictly in lost trade revenue or dipping stock tickers. The true cost is the absolute, undeniable death of the Western alliance and the permanent, chaotic destabilization of the global order. We are actively watching the very architects of the modern civilized world tear down their own creation over raw resources and geopolitical pride. The vital safety net that has miraculously prevented a third world war for 80 years has just been repurposed into a loaded weapon aimed at our own heads. You are currently living through the exact defining moment that future history books will point to as the catastrophic turning point of the 21st century. Now, I need to hear from you down in the comments section. Do you truly believe the United States military will actually fire live munitions on European allied ships? Or is this the ultimate high-stakes bluff designed to force Europe into total economic submission? Drop your deep strategic analysis in the comments below, because the mainstream media is absolutely terrified to allow the public to have this vital conversation. If you want the raw, unfiltered truth on how to financially and physically survive this impending geopolitical collapse, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on all notifications right now. The world is rapidly shifting beneath our feet. The old rules no longer apply.